Hello, friends. We are in Revelation chapter 14. Here's what it said in verse 1. It said, "Then I looked, and there was before me a lamb standing on Mount Zion." Now, the reference concerning the lamb is going to be pretty consistent through this thing. As a matter of fact, 26 times the reference is the lamb is used. And I believe it's primarily because of the fact that that is the symbol of redemption for us. That is the price that was paid, emphasizing the sacrifice for the sins of the world. And so 26 times it references to the lamb being used. And so he's using it here in chapter 14 and verse 1. He said, "Then I looked, and there was before me the lamb standing on Mount Zion." Now this is interesting here. Before we go on, let's look at where this lamb is standing, okay? There's a debate as to whether that's actually Jerusalem with Mount Zion, or is it an event that's happening in heaven? That's a good question. I personally tend to think that it is in Israel, literally on earth, because verse 2 says he heard a voice from heaven. And so that emphasizes the fact that the voice that they heard, they were not in heaven. That was a voice from heaven to earth. So he said that the lamb was standing there on Mount Zion. I want to just briefly say something, if I can capsule this. There's something about the nature of God that tends to select a place, just as he selects a people. There's places where God has chosen to place his name there. I believe that there's events that took place that place somehow has become a holy place. Now, please understand, not something that we worship, but it just seems to be a place where God has chosen to place his name. You know, I'm reminded of I've had many trips to Israel and over the years, and a lot of people have wondered why the draw to Israel like it is. I'm just telling you something. It's amazing. People from all over the world are drawn to that place. And it isn't just because of the fact that, well, that was where King David was. There is literally it's like a magnet drawing people. And there's some people that they get in there and they can't leave. But that is the place where God breathed, God spoke, God did something, God chose. And because of that, the very nature of his presence is going to be embedded into everything that happens. It is, tradition tells it. This is what I can say. Obviously, there's no way that they could ever know, but tradition has told it that the rock up there on where the Temple Mount was, that was the place where God stood when he orchestrated creation. And it was almost like somebody who came into a room and their fragrance that was upon them, their cologne, their aftershave, whatever the case is, remained in the room, even when he walked away. And people are drawn to that place like a moth to a flame. You see that's the place where Abraham was going to offer Isaac. That's the place where David set up, right in that area. He set up the city of David. I believe that rock up there right now, and I've been inside where the mosque is back before they stopped letting anybody in. I was in there before, and it's just a big flat rock. I believe that's the place where David brought the Ark of the Covenant when he brought it into Jerusalem. I believe he brought it and set on that rock. That's the place where the temple was built. It's like everything was centered around this place that God breathed. And so I believe that it's a very special place. I mean, I've gone to Jerusalem and I looked around and I'm thinking, well, it's a bit of a fixer-upper. I mean, it's not exactly the most elegant place that you could ever see right now, but it's a place where God chose to place his name. And it's beautiful. It's compelling. You want to be there. And so the Lamb was standing there on Mount Zion, which would be the Lord Jesus Christ. Okay? So let's go on and read. Let me pass by that. "Then I looked, and there before me was the Lamb standing on Mount Zion, and with him 144,000 who had his name and his father's name written on their forehead. Now, these were also mentioned back, you had to go back to chapter 7, and this 144,000, they were also there. And there's three components concerning that. Number one, they were sealed, they were servants of God, and they were all of the tribe of Israel. They were, the 144,000 was the 12 tribes of Israel. And they were saved during this tribulation period and protected from it. It's like God just really just put a wall around them. And so he said in verse 2, he said, and I heard a sound from heaven like the roar of rushing waters and like a loud peal of thunder. And the sound I heard was like that of the harpists playing their harps. And it said in verse 3, it said, and they sang a new song. These 144,000, they sang a new song before the throne and before the four living creatures and the elders, and no one could learn that song except the 144,000 that had been redeemed from the earth. Okay? Now, let's look at verse 4. And these are those who did not defile themselves with women, for they remained virgins. Now, let me just say quickly, I believe this is really figurative. There's a couple of scriptures that you can apply to that. Isaiah chapter 37, verse 22, it says Israel is referred to as the virgin daughter of Zion. And even 2 Corinthians 11 and 2, Paul made this statement. He said he longs to present the church to Christ as a virgin daughter. Their hearts were pure and undefiled. So it said that these 144,000 had not defiled themselves with women, for they remained virgins. And they follow the Lamb wherever he goes. They were purchased, they were redeemed from among mankind, and they were offered as firstfruits to God and the Lamb. Now I love this in verse 5. It said concerning them, it said, no lie, in other words, no deceit was found in their mouths. And they were faultless, they were blameless, without fault. They were uncompromised. They were committed to Christ. They were committed to God, heart and soul. So now we're going to look at verse 6. He said, now see, this is another segment of what he saw here. He said, I saw another angel flying midair, and he had the eternal gospel to proclaim to those who live on the earth, to every nation, tribe, language, and people. Now, what is this? This is an invitation. Isn't it interesting how right smack dab in the middle of all of the tribulations that's taking place now through the book of Revelation, there's a pause here in this chapter that he says, here's what we're going to do. We're going to declare that there is a way for people. There is an invitation for people. He said this angel was flying midair and it had the eternal gospel to proclaim to those that lived on the earth. And that flying angel who flew around the earth, throughout the atmosphere, he proclaimed the gospel. And this is God has always chosen those who were redeemed to proclaim the gospel. So why would he change an angel now? Well, quite frankly, the church has been taken away and the others have been martyred. And so now he calls on this angel to fly around the globe proclaiming the gospel so that everyone gets an opportunity. It's one of those last calls. And he goes to every tribe, every nation, every language, every people. Not only are these 144,000 proclaiming the gospel, but in addition to that, the angel is flying, proclaiming the gospel. And I would think if I saw an angel in the air flying, proclaiming something, I would be very attentive to hear what he had to say. Wouldn't you? Well, sure you would. But he said, I saw this angel in verse 6 flying midair, and he had the eternal gospel to proclaim to those that lived on the earth, to every nation, tribe, language, and people. This is definitely a last call. Now, verse 8, he says, a second angel followed and said, fallen, fallen is Babylon the Great, which made all nations to drink the madness, the maddening wine of her adulteries, her fornications. Now this, what he's talking about here, that is the proclamation of the doom of the Antichrist system. The Antichrist system that's the proclamation of its doom. And we're going to read a little bit more about this over in chapter 17 and chapter 18. Okay? Then this third angel preaches the condemnation to those who choose to follow the beast and to take his mark. Now you see that down through verse 9 through 11. Let's read that. It said, verse 9, a third angel followed them and said in a loud voice, if anyone worships the beast and its image and receives its mark in their forehead or on their hand, they too will drink the wine of God's fury, which has been poured full strength into the cup of his wrath. They will be tormented with burning sulfur in the presence of the holy angels and of the Lamb. Verse 11, here's what it says. The smoke of their torment will rise forever and ever. Wow. There will be no rest day and night for those who worship the beast and his image, or for anyone who receives the mark of his name, the mark of its name. Okay? Now, here's what he's going to do in verse 12. He's going to talk about the remnant. Now, here's what he says. He says, this calls for patient endurance on the part of the people of God who keep his commands and remain faithful to Jesus. Verse 13 says, then I heard a voice from heaven saying, write this, okay? Blessed are the dead who die in the Lord from now on. Yes, says the Spirit, they will rest from their labor, for their works, their deeds will follow them. Okay, I love that. Of course, we know that to be true there. All of those that have sacrificed and given and done, he said, they're going to rest from their labor, and their works and their deeds are going to follow them. We see that over in chapter 21. You remember he said there, we'll get to that later, but he said, I saw the dead, I saw the dead, small and great, being raised up, and they stood before the throne of God. And it said the books were open, and another book was open, which was the book of life. Then he said they were judged out of the things that were written in the books. Isn't that interesting? That is the thing that God's going to, everything you've ever done. One place said, even if you give a cup of water to someone in my name, you won't lose your reward. Look how many places throughout the Word of God where the Bible talks about stewardship and the reward. Well, what's the reward going to be? Well, certainly God rewards us on this earth. He blesses us coming in. He blesses us going out. But he said, you're going to be judged by the things that were written in the books, plural. Everything is downloaded into that hard drive, and it's going to be pulled up. Every good thing you ever did, every sacrifice you made, everything that you have done, you're going to be rewarded for. There's going to be degrees of reward that are going to be given for those who have laid down their life, who have sacrificed, who have given their all for the gospel, who worked when it was difficult, who didn't quit, who didn't run away when things got hard. There's going to be a special reward for them. Now, I also believe that there's going to be degrees of punishment on the other end for those that have lived lives of wickedness. They're going to be judged. Obviously, their eternal judgment is sealed, but there's going to be degrees of judgment against them based on their works. Now, your works don't save you, but your works are going to position you. And I think that's very important. I say this, let me just flip back over to the other side. I want to encourage those of you that have worked tirelessly. You feel like nobody's helping me. Nobody cares. I'm telling you, God sees and God writes down everything that you have done. And he's not going to forget it. At the judgment day, he's going to bring up every time you showed up when nobody would show up. Every time you cleaned the floor when nobody else was there. Every time you stood in the gap and prayed. Everything that you did is going to be brought up at that time. And the reward system is going to be handed out to you. And it's going to be a wonderful, wonderful thing. Because the books are going to be open. Now, let's move forward to verse 14. The last section is in this chapter, and he's going to talk about harvesting the earth and trampling the winepress. So let's look at this, okay? He said in verse 14, I looked, and there before me was a white cloud. Now that represents purity. And seated on the cloud was one like the Son of Men, one like the Son of Man, with a crown of gold, now that represents victory, on his head, and a sharp sickle in his hand. That represents authority. Now see, this is a reference to Jesus being the harvester of the earth. That's exactly what's going to happen. The Lord Jesus Christ is going to be the harvester. Now, he's going to use angels to do this. He'll use them in this area and that area, but make no mistake about it. Jesus is the glorious one, and he stands in purity, in victory, and in authority. Okay? And it's a reference to Jesus being the harvester of the earth, and he's going to harvest souls. He's going to take back the earth. We saw whenever he took the scroll out of the hand of him that sat upon the throne and began to open it. Well, that scroll was the title deed to the earth. And the reason for the tribulation, he is smiting it with the wrath of God, that every area where Satan had a root system of any kind into this earth, he's obliterating it. He's smashing it. That's the reason the wrath of God is coming. It's not coming against people. It's coming against the dominion and the title deed that Lucifer held over mankind, over the earth. Okay? So he's going to take that back. Now, I want you to remember there's also a reference to where the tares were sown among the wheat. You remember that when Jesus was talking? And he said the angels are going to come and separate them. That's Matthew chapter 13, verse 36. He said, at the end of the age, this is what he said, at the end of the age, God's going to use angels as instruments of his harvesting process, separating the wheat, the righteous, from the weeds, who are the ungodly. And here he's using 3 angels, okay? Now, let's look at this. Now we see 3 other angels, not the ones that were there. Now there's 3 other angels, okay? The first one is announcing the harvest of the earth. Let's look at that in verse 15. Then another angel came out of the temple and called out in a loud voice to him who sat on the cloud, take your sickle and reap, because the time to reap has come, for the harvest of the earth is ripe. So he was seated on the cloud, swung the sickle over the earth, and the earth was reaped. The earth was harvested. Okay, now verse 17 said, and another angel came out of the temple of heaven, and he too had a sharp sickle. And verse 18, still another angel who had power over the charge of the fire. Well, I don't know exactly what that means, but that's got to be quite incredible. This one had power over the charge of the fire. And he came from the altar, and he cried with a loud voice to him that had the sharp sickle. And this is to angel number 2. Take your sharp sickle and gather the clusters of grapes from the earth's wine, because its grapes are ripe. So the angel, not Jesus here, the angel swung his sickle into the earth and gathered its grapes, and he threw them into the great winepress of God's wrath. They were trampled in the winepress outside the city, and blood flowed out of the press, raising as high as the horses' bridles for the distance of 16 furlongs. The NIV says Sadida. Now, let me explain this to you. 1,600 furlongs, that's 180 miles. So this is figurative, because Israel is only 200 miles north to south. Okay? So what he's referring to here is the Battle of Armageddon, when all the nations begin to converge in the Jezreel Valley against Israel and the God of Israel. And it said the blood is going to flow from Jezreel Valley to the Kidron Valley. Now, the Kidron Valley, that's what separates Jerusalem from the Mount of Olives. When you're up at the Mount of Olives, the Garden of Gethsemane, you can look, and the Kidron Valley is right in between there. Right now there's graves and different things in that Kidron Valley. But then as you go up the other side of the Kidron Valley, you've got the walls of Jerusalem. So it said that the blood flows from the Jezreel Valley to the Kidron Valley, which separates Jerusalem from the Mount of Olives. Kidron, it means in the Hebrew, it means black. Now, where it got that, it would often run black from the blood of all of the animals that were sacrificed on the Temple Mount at the time of Passover. There was so much slaughter of animals that literally that valley would run black with it. Okay? But see, you can see that what's going to happen here. Now we're going to begin to talk about getting into this thing to where you're going to see this battle of Armageddon beginning to be set up and established. We're going to get a little bit more into that, and it's going to be really powerful. You don't want to miss that. Okay, so there we have. Now we're looking here at Revelation chapter 14, and I think this is a really good thing to kind of settle back in, because again, he's kind of given a little bit of a reprieve where he's talking about harvesting the earth and the angels preaching the gospel and the 144,000, and then in chapter 15 he's going to begin to turn it another direction. We're going to begin to see how things begin to unfold from there. Well, I hope you've enjoyed this. Please understand, I can only give you an overview. There's no way possible that in this amount of time that I can be as comprehensive as I would like. But if I could just kind of spark your thinking, maybe your imagination, encourage you to do some research, it really will open up some things. I just want to provide a little bit of guidelines, and that's what I've done through all the teaching of the New Testament. I'm basically giving a guideline of the verse by verse and chapter by chapter of the entire New Testament. Now, if you'd like to have more of that, you can go to my website, jerryedmond.com. And on my website, I've got a thing there called videos, and it will pull down every book of the New Testament. And I'm doing just this very thing. I'm going verse by verse and chapter by chapter. And it will really give you a time of study. Those of you that are truly interested in studying the Word, these will help you, and hopefully will explain some things to help you in your journey as you're beginning to discover Christ. Okay, but check out that website, jerryedmond.com, and I've got a lot of other things on there that'll bless you. All right, thank you for joining me today. I so much appreciate you being with me. I've developed so many wonderful friends, and that's valuable to me. Your friendship to me has great value. Thank you for being my friend, and I'm looking forward to seeing you in the next chapter. I'll see you then. God bless you. Bye-bye.